Clementines by ValleyFlower. Clem, previously known as other things, was trying their best. They've saved the town of Laugh-A-Lot, and there had been an entire feast hosted in honor of them and their crew, and everyone was safe, alive, and happy. Well, almost everyone. Clem continued to quietly stare up at the ceiling of her room. It was nighttime now, and no matter how hard she tried to keep her eyes closed, they simply wouldn't obey her. There were too many thoughts bouncing inside her head, like pretzel in her globe when the ocean was getting too rough under the ship. There were no such problems for the froctopus in the inn, but Clem's mind was chaotic all the same. Tritons were of naturally fluid identities. Most had control over their own name from an early age, and could change it whenever they felt like. When a Triton made a major change in their life, they often changed their identity completely. It was simply what felt right. But the prophecy said it's about Gillian Tidestrider and what he was destined to do in his life. Not Clem Asher, who had discovered their name in bits and pieces on this beautiful island. Who had spent so many nights staring up at the ceiling and wishing, harder than anything, that she could have the freedom to be herself. Clem still remembered the moments they had found their name. Looking confusedly between two sellers of orange fruits, hearing shouts from vendors all around of apples, mandarins, and clementines. And then it had suddenly clicked. Clementines. Clem. She knew that she definitely had a pattern with her naming of anything. Pretzel and apple came to mind. But at that point, she didn't care. Her mind had decided on which fruit to choose the moment she heard the word, and a smile played across her face as she walked back to her friends. Unfortunately, that was where Clem discovered that being called the wrong name when you knew what your true name was hurt a lot more than it did when you were still undecided. But they couldn't say anything. Not now, not ever. The prophecy was of Gillian Tidestrider, and they could not disappoint their people. At least the Tidestrider part was still theirs. Right? When they had been walking through the forest to reach the witch doctor a few days ago, Clem had been asking Jay about what all the plants around the path were called. So far she had learned about oak, bramble, nettle, fern, rose, and so many other words that fit the beautiful things they described perfectly. She pointed to a tree with small, neat leaves and a dark trunk. Jay, what name does that one use? Jay squinted for a second before remembering. Oh, that's an ash. It doesn't get used for ships because it rots in water pretty easily, but it makes for great trinkets and stuff. And once again, the word clicked. Clem was confused at first. She knew that Clem fitted, so why does this fit too? Clem, Ash? When would her mind stop clicking on words? Wait. Clem, Ash. Clem, Ash. Clem, Asher. In that moment she knew that she found her full name. It felt right, it felt like hers. And even if she could never use it to others, she would still treasure it. Gill, you good? The use of Clem's other name firmly reminded them that they needed to be more careful about these things. Yeah, I'm quite alright, Jay. I was thinking about how all these plants have such colorful names compared to the Undersea, where we usually call almost everything kelp. There must be dozens of plants that get lumped under that label. They looked to Jay, trying to assess if their rambling was annoying to the other. But Jay looked like she was listening, and in a foolish moment, they decided to take a gamble. Tell me, Jay, how does the name Clementine sound as a name? You know, such as for any potential pet I may find in the future. Jay seemed to consider it for a moment before answering. Please don't adopt anything unless it can get its own food. But it's a very nice name, yeah. Could be shortened to Clem, too. Despite the fact that Jay thought that Clem was asking about a hypothetical pet and not themselves, the joy just shot through their mind was just as potent. 'Cause Jay liked their name, they tried to suppress the beaming grin they felt rising, and replied, It could, indeed. I'll keep that in mind. Jay felt like she had definitely missed some parts of this conversation that made Gill that invested in a name, but she passed it off as just another strange Gill thing. The two walked in silence for a while more, and would not break it until a strange insect left the bushes and started the oddest fight of their lives. Clem had given up on sleep a while ago. Instead, she had climbed out of her window, Pretzel's globe fastened firmly on her belt, and made her way to the waterfront where the albatross was being built. At this time of night, the area was empty. The moon made the small waves in the ocean glitter like jewels, as Clem sat on the edge of the land. Her mind hadn't raced this fast in a long time, and it was not an enjoyable experience. But father, everyone else is allowed to change their name. Why am I not? The young Laurel Tidestrider, the name borrowed from books about the seas, shouted. The tears in their eyes were not visible on the water, but were easily audible in their voice. Their father loomed over them, rage clear in his face. Gillian Tidestrider, you have a destiny. Your name is written into it. It was chosen for you before you were even born. And unless you can change prophecies, I will not have my son defy the gods. Stop entertaining these silly fantasies. You are not wasting my time and everyone else's. I'm not your son, and if this prophecy speaks of me as such, then maybe it's not meant for— They were cut off by their father's hand, darted out to grab their neck and pin them against the wall. You will not speak such slander against the gods in this house, Gillian. You seem to think that you have a choice. You do not. Laurel was trying to claw at his hands, desperate to uncover their gills so they can breathe again. If I ever hear anything about this again, you will suffer worse consequences. Am I clear? They nodded, terror clear in their eyes. Good. And that was that. Their father let go and left the room, leaving Laurel gasping for breath between sobs. Leaving Gillian, he had to be Gillian now. He had to be. Jay was walking towards the albatross. Nightmares had woken her again, so she had no point in lying awake in bed when she could watch the sun rise from the dock. Her footsteps echoed in the narrow streets until she exited the alley, catching the sight of the horizon at last. She stopped for a moment to take in the scenery, a calm ocean, the majestic frame of the half-built albatross, and one small figure sat by the edge, arms wrapped around their legs and head resting on their knees, shaking. Shit, are they okay? As Jay got closer, she could see more details about the figure. Seafoam green hair hanging around their face, and a little globe of water fastened on their belt. Oh fuck, that was Gill. And he really didn't look okay. She could hear her friend's stuttering breath now, like he was trying to stop himself from crying. She rushed over and crouched beside him. Gill, it's me, Jay. Can you hear me? He barely reacted other than a flinch when she started speaking. Shit. I don't know what's happening, but usually grounding helps me, so I'm going to try to help you with that. Okay, Gill? That same flinch again, but it wasn't at her speaking. It was right at the end of her sentence that he reacted this time. It was the name. And that was the last piece Jay needed in a puzzle that has been constructing itself in her mind for quite a while. She knew that Tritons often changed their names to reflect their maturity and what phase of their life they were in. But Gill had never shown any interest in that. In fact, he said he had the same name for his entire life, and seemed to use it far more than necessary. Like he was trying to convince himself too. The questions in the forest, wanting to know the names of everything, the little grin on his face when Jay complimented the name he asked about in the forest. It all made sense now. She reached out to brush his hair away from his face and met a pair of terrified blue eyes and asked a single, quiet question. Clem? The look of pure, intense shock, surprise, recognition on Clem's face was enough to confirm her suspicions. She put an arm around him and he froze for a second before absolutely breaking. Jay only feels the trembling get stronger for a second before she's pulling Clem into a hug as sobs rack his body. He looks so much more fragile without his armor on, face buried into Jay's shoulder. She can feel the tears already dampening the fabric, but that doesn't matter right now. They stay like that for quite a while, until Clem isn't shaking anymore, and Jay is pretty sure her shoulder is soaked. Her friend pulls back from the hug awkwardly. Enough to look her in the eyes, but definitely not breaking contact. Jay, I apologize for this. Clem sounds different. As well as a scratchy quality from crying a lot, there's something else. It's a little bit higher, still formal, but not the deep one that Jay is used to hearing. Clem. She sees the watery but still there smile on his face, and can't help an answering smile of her own before she continues. You don't need to apologize for anything because you done nothing wrong. I just have a couple of questions if that's okay. Clem nods, looking slightly apprehensive. Okay, good. First, do you still use he, him, or something else? I prefer they and she. Clem looks almost scared to answer, but Jay just nods. Okay, that's cool. Am I using okays too much? Not sure. Anyway, Second question is, why didn't you tell us? Clem stiffens up. Their voice has gone quiet again when they reply. My other name is the subject of a prophecy, and I'm not allowed to change it. Doing so is rejecting my destiny and the will of the gods. My father made that extremely clear. They're staring straight ahead now, expression carefully kept blank. Jay had a bad feeling about this. What do you mean by made clear? She asks quietly. Clem takes a deep breath in, and Jay is confused, until they place their own hand around their neck, fingers carefully positioned to cover their gills. Like so, they whisper, squeezing their hold tighter, before letting go and shuddering. Gods, no wonder Clem had hidden this for so long. Jay doesn't know what to say to that, so she pulls Clem closer to her side and tries to gather her words. Your dad's wrong, she says. Prophecies predict the future, and you being who you are is a part of the future. If it finds you, it finds you, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. You're not doing anything wrong, Clem. For once, Jay's words had come out sounding just as good as they did in her head, and she was very grateful for that. Thank you, Jay. Their voice is still more subdued than usual, but Jay can hear the quiet note of joy in Clem's voice. The sun slowly rises on the two pirates, and even as the town begins to wake up, the little corner of the world feels more peaceful than it ever has.